I'd rather have a bowl of...
Cocoa Pops.
Okay, now do it as soon after as possible. Okay. I'd rather have a bowl of...
Cocoa Pops.
Okay. That gave me two wildly different results, so there's lots to work with. Ready when you are.
Look for the bare necessities, the simple bare necessities.
Hi, it's Isaac from the podcast you're about to listen to. We recorded this, as you'll find out, in an unorthodox way. And yeah, it turned out, I was going to say about as well as you'd expect, but probably less than that on balance. So the audio is pretty odd. I've done my best to salvage as much as I can, which meant like randomly turning up the volume to 1,000% at the end of sentences because Ringer just cut them off at random with reckless abandon, which was a lovely rhyme, and I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope also that it makes up for the rest of the show. Audio quality will be back to normal next episode, and the same rigorously high standards that you're used to, the luxury in which you dwell, will return. No worries. Thanks for bearing with us. Much love.
Hello and welcome to episode, 89?
It sure is.
89!
Oh, I can't believe it.
Of That's a Shame. Think of this, just 11 episodes away from perhaps the most unfathomable milestone known to man.
Can't fathom it.
A century of shame.
Wow, is that what we're going to call it?
That's the title.
That's the name of the month of celebrations.
That's the sort of planning that we're doing at the moment. You might have guessed that by the impromptu nature of this episode and the suspiciously absent nature of last episode.
Oh, we were going to gloss over that and pretend it never happened. We were going to gaslight you.
The severe absence of an apology from Isaac.
Are you joking? I tweeted.
No. When?
I did a nice tweet about just ear canals and all sorts. I can't believe that you've just exposed yourself as someone who doesn't read our own Twitter feed.
I looked a day later and, well, you may well have done it, but nobody had responded to it because we had no notification about it.
It got a like. Got 3 likes, in fact. So that's,
Wow.
What's more is a man to do?
When did you tweet it, pal?
It was
probably this morning.
8:50 p.m. It was 1 minute ago. I liked it from all 3 of my fake accounts with which I patrol and manage our image. Okay, is that what you want to hear?
Yeah.
Now
That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you. Those accounts you set up using the embezzled Patreon dollar.
It's got to go somewhere, and it might as well finance free email accounts. Listeners are, they're an astute bunch, aren't they? Is that fair to say?
Oh, definitely.
Do you think they'll have picked up on... I mean, there's always a disparity between the way we sound. That's just the nature of 2 different people talking. Even into the same...
That's the nature of voice, which is going to be a theme.
It's going to be the theme. And it's really nice of you to flag it up so explicitly because...
That's all right. I just thought,
to leave people behind. What are they going to have noticed with regards to your sound today? And how, Declan, on earth, on God's, Jesus' circle, are you to account for it?
Well, they may have noticed my quality being somewhat rustlier.
Diminished.
Somewhat...
worse.
Well, to put it frankly, somewhat road-like.
Oh, that's a very specific... is that like an audio term?
No,
is that one of those audio engineering?
It's one that refers to the roads.
Right, okay. It's just that you don't normally hear...
Upon which I am.
Ah, even as we speak.
Right now. In fact, listeners are almost certainly going to experience a severe drop in the quality of this show momentarily because I'm going to be stuck in traffic under a bridge.
Wow,
which is
that's good news.
One of podcast's many unforeseen problems.
It's weird, isn't it? Because I don't feel like the Joe Rogan Experience, which is a roundly terrible show but very popular, or Russell Brand
Trap House. They're not
Maron
stuck in a tunnel.
You don't get a reply all episode cancelled because they're like can't do it, man. Stuck in the old overpass again.
But that's a shame. We like to bring you the reality of the podcast.
Exactly, because
we've often described it as a glimpse behind the curtain of art.
And where better a glimpse than the middle of a tunnel on some kind of A road in North London? I mean,
exactly.
That's what it's like. This is the beating heart of the city coming at you live. And you can't, but you could at patreon.com/ShameCity pay for that kind of insight and experience.
Literally, as in my petrol for this journey. No, I haven't done it on purpose. No. Essentially, what happened was we had a busy weekend, didn't we?
Yeah, but on the day of
setting up an exciting project.
Yeah, and on Sunday, the whole day, it just wiped from my memory entirely. I don't know what I was doing. Normally, if we're going to miss one, we're like, oh, I'm not feeling it like I've been, because I've been quite busy. I've worked 30 hours in about 2.5 days, which is, for me, outlandish.
Obscene. Yeah. Absolutely obscene.
So I've been kind of out of it anyway. But normally when we're, we can both sense the vibe is heading towards, should we just put out a tweet? We'll do it the next day. I'm not brilliant, because we don't want to give you fake, do we? I mean, we respect our audience.
No, of course not.
We don't want to have to sit there and pretend stuff's funny when you're just tired and sad. So we normally have a little build up, and then someone's like, yeah, let's just call it on this one. We'll do it tomorrow. But Sunday we were just nothing happened. Time just elapsed without any mention or memory.
Yeah. We spent about an hour in the same room with both our girlfriends and just had no concept that it was Sunday.
Really weird.
I had no idea. And then it wasn't until Monday when I was driving home from tutoring, I thought, I'll listen to the last episode. And I looked at the date and thought,
from February.
That was ages ago. That was a week.
It's our Christmas special. Loki smart.
Yeah. So then we were like, okay, well, let's definitely make sure that we record tomorrow. Yeah. That being Tuesday then. Uh-huh. And then Tuesday we were out, both of us in separate places. Then we went to an event that we will tell you about later, and had planned to record afterwards, but that fell through.
Yeah, in a big way. And then it
was optimistic, to be fair.
Yeah, because it finished.
And then now it's today. And we had plans to record 12 till 1. Mm-hmm. But then I was so ill and hay fevery that I couldn't even think about looking
getting a lot of the pollen
anywhere other than into my own pillow. Oh, so much.
So much pollen.
And then Isaac wasn't back until 12:30 anyway.
Yeah.
So there really was no chance. And then we were going to record later, 4 till 5, and then it turns out that I'm out. So, So what we've done instead is we've gone back to our faithful friend, the Ringer app.
Yes. Now, I'm going to put out, bless you, a strong recommendation for anyone who is in the podcasting community for the Ringer app. And I'm going to do that not solely because I have a lot of, belief in it as a product. I mean, it has come through for us in a big way.
Almost the opposite.
And it does the job. But really, I just do feel guilty because I have now for the second or third time exploited their 30-day free trial to pull an episode out of the bag that would otherwise not be possible due to the last time was when I was in Edinburgh, wasn't it? And the whole Wi-Fi in the flat thing was one great big lie. And now here it is coming through for us in a big way once again. So thanks to Ringer. That's got no E because they're trendy and that's the generation we live in.
Exactly.
So if
how long do you think Kinder eggs take before they drop the E?
If they were allowed in America.
And the I.
Oh, KNDR. That's cool.
That sounds like
a radio station.
Sounds like North Korea.
Welcome to KNDR with me. I'm into it in a big way. So yeah, here we are. Sorry for late.
I'm driving to tutoring.
I'm sitting here in my desk. You'll be able to tell because I'll sound lovely and Declan will sound like a little tinny robot. Turns out that was not at all true when I listened back editing this episode. At points, I'm just much worse quality than Declan, so might be taking back all that Ringer praise, although again, it was exploiting a free trial, so swings and roundabouts, as with all things. Back to the show.
And part of that is because there's a car in the background, In fact, loads of them.
And the other part is made of tin.
Yeah. Well, the other part of that is being recorded on an iPhone earphone microphone. Wow.
An iPhone earphone microphone. You should work in branding. I've never told you you've got a real knack.
And also because, as I mentioned earlier, the hay fever has distorted all of my senses. So I have no idea what I'm doing.
What about touch? How's that going with hay fever?
Dreadful. No. I can't even feel this steering wheel. But that might be because I'm not touching it.
Covered in petals and pollen.
I'm just letting the road take me where it wants.
Well, I guess that's what you've got to do, really. I see the road as one big tarmac log flume, and you just sit upon it, going with its whim. But I'm going to put it out there that this is going to be a hell of an episode regardless. I mean, we're already probably halfway through, at least. But
this traffic, we could be here for hours. This could be our longest episode in months.
It's going to be quite the saga then. Why don't we kick off by telling people about our journey intellectually and I guess also physically last night. Where were we? Why were we? Who were we?
Well, we decided to indulge ourselves and to become an explicit and frankly, in many ways, disgusting part of what you might call the London liberal metropolitan elite.
Oh, them.
You know, some people, you know, the average Joe, he goes down to the pub for a drink with his friends.
That's me.
Others went to go and see, you know, previews of Jurassic World, Fallen Kingdom. Right. We, however, decided to use our time more intellectually, more academically. And what we did was we popped along to one of the most tragically, sad left phrases you could ever hope to hear, which is a Guardian masterclass.
The theme was how to be as pretentious as you can. So we were served with avocado wine and...
Was that avocado hyphen wine or avocado comma wine?
No, it's when you shout at an avocado enough that it just shrivels into juice. And then you down the result. Preferably
I'd say that'd be Dash then. Yeah, Dash. Yeah, so we headed along to the Guardian, I don't know, HQ? Is that what it is?
That's definitely what they call it, the Guardian HQ, they say.
Yeah, the GHQ. And we were interested beforehand on who would be there. Basically, it was a class being given by one of our favourite journalists, Gary Young, called How to Find Your Voice as a Writer. And I mean, it was more, I think, on both our parts out of interest rather than thinking that we would learn any kind of secret code that would suddenly unlock potential. Because
look in the bottom drawer.
Yeah. As we've mentioned before on this show with regards to writing, we're both kind of the school that, for the most part, being taught how to write is not going to help you an awful lot.
Yeah. But if anyone was going to have insight, a journalist,
oh God, it was going to be Gary
cranking out words every few minutes of the day, or else you're fired. He's got a lot to say.
And as they go, as we said, he's a good one. So I figured we might go along. But what we were interested in beforehand, as we were on our way, was who is going to be there besides us?
Yeah.
How big is the group going to be? You know, what's the demographic going to be? We had a slight panic that it was going to be a BAME only event.
Yeah.
And we'd be the only...
I think we both had a kind of false memory, probably as a result of our awkward millennial navigation of white privilege, that Gary Young is a black writer and The Guardian do events that would be... Well, I mean, he told us that they'd have a bursary for people who would otherwise not be likely to get into journalism and stuff.
Yeah.
So they're quite socially conscious. And then I booked the tickets really late at night, or I booked my ticket and then told you about it. And then when you mentioned, I joked about the idea that it might have been targeted at minority groups event to kind of help people get into journalism who haven't had the privilege of going to a Russell Group university. And then we were like, oh, that'd be funny. And then on the way we were like, oh no, but what or if it is. So I had to like pull up the email
because the
to
first
be very sure that we weren't just crashing a party we weren't invited to.
Yeah, and it kind of was solidified for me, this fear, when I was reading through. There were a selection of articles you had to read before you went, and the first of these was an article Gary himself had written called it was about Langston Hughes's essay, "The Negro Writer and the Racial Mountain."
The Racial Mountain, yeah.
Yeah, all about how to kind of navigate being being black and being a writer and being a black writer. Yeah. And I was just reading it going, this is, fascinating stuff, but it doesn't seem to apply to me.
I do hope.
And then thinking, is it supposed to?
Yeah. But our fears were allayed when we saw, the usual scattering of middle
Guardian
class,
audience,
mostly white audience,
mostly really old, and that was
because it was called Finding Your Voice as a Writer, and as we both noted, the people next to you, there was a whole row that looked like they'd fallen off the bus into the grave, and I feel like
they had choice between tickets for Here and Dignitas, and they accidentally they pulled the short straw.
Oh, bless them! But you do. I mean, not to disparage, I think it's great that, an older person's getting involved in it, but there is a certain amount of Gary's under 50 and he's been working for 30 years or something in the field. And you must be sitting there as someone who's 80 being like, I wonder if I've missed the boat on this one. Just a tad.
Yeah. It's not even that. It's just that I would think at that age, you just kind of be a bit more gung-ho about it and think, I'm just going to write, rather than thinking, I'm going to take the time to really try and find and nail down my voice. I'd think, well, I've had this voice for 85 years. It's
still don't know what it is.
Let's put it on paper. It feels like a slight waste of time to be trying that hard to nail down the details.
What if one of those old people's gone home and found that they had a totally different voice to the one they thought they had, though? They've for 80 years just been someone else, and now all of a sudden the veil has been lifted and they've transformed into a new person.
Well, that's the most tragic option of all.
Yeah, because then they can only live with that person for about 10 minutes and then they've got to say goodbye, wave that corpse into the grave.
What if they went home and found that they wrote kind of naturally in that Clockwork Orange slang? That was their writing voice.
That would be very unfortunate for all concerned. So
you'd be unlikely to get anything published.
Yeah, very much so. The first, it set off badly for me because there was an entertaining bag check. That was fine. I like seeing the inside of my own bag through one of those scanners. Always a treat. But then they directed us upstairs to a little cafe, where they were giving out free wine. Now, that's, of course, a treat to be enjoyed. Free alcohol at any stage of any day is a winner. But not a minute after giving us this wine, they called us in. They were like, okay, follow us. We're going to walk straight to the Scott room, I think it was called, where Gary will be presenting the first section of the class. And the man power walked off with a speed that really confused me, given his size and attitude. He just zoomed away like some sort of race car. And
he referred to himself as the Pied Piper, leading people down really loudly, which was creepy. But then, as I pointed out at the time, the Pied Piper sort of stuck around for a bit and lured them. This bloke just fucked off. He was like, "Carry on!" and then ran away and hoped we all chased him.
It's like a drive-by. I wonder, the Pied Piper, what's the moral of that story? Because they don't pay him for his music, so he steals their kids. Is that right? Oh no, they don't pay him for.
That's not the moral.
Get rid of the rats.
He gets rid of the rats, and then they're like, "Oh, well, the rats are gone now, so it's not a problem." And he's like, "Yeah, but that's only because I did do this."
So the moral is,
oh well,
it's like a message. It's a message for freelancers to get everything in writing. Basically, the theme. Yeah. So he fucked off in a big way, and then, as if some kind of choreographed trap had been set at the end of the corridor that he'd fucked off to, and not 20 seconds further down, was a giant burly security guard stopping you from taking the wine.
He reminded me of that P. Barnes from the Sovereign Citizen video.
Oh, yeah.
Who like won't let the guy in with his camera. He was just like, no. Just like the widest man.
Yeah.
Who managed to take up a whole corridor. Who had like sort of a bloodhound's nose for wine.
Yeah.
And there were so many people trying to like sneak past as he was stopping someone else. There was a girl who got so far, she was like round the corner. And he sort of lent some kind of Mr. Tickle arm over and was like, no wine.
There will be no wine, my child. Gary will not stand.
Just like, what it did me, I mean, this was annoying because I was looking forward, in that liberal London Metropolitan elite. Yep, glass of red wine, Guardian Masterclass. What more could you want on a Tuesday evening?
Yeah.
But what it did provide was an excellent opportunity to minesweep a fuck ton of free wine because everyone was having to everyone was making the very wrong decision not to just down it. It was only like the tiniest, like single mouthful of wine anyway.
It was like,
and they would just go,
you asked for a regular glass and you got that. You'd have been a bit disappointed, but not by much. It was just below like a normal restaurant glass of wine.
Yeah. And so they would just go, oh, okay, and just putting them down on this table for free. So I just stood there for a couple of minutes. And
Declan actually missed the first hour of the class because he was just polishing off bottle after bottle.
I was chatting up that security guard.
Oh, yeah.
I liked the way he said no wine.
We had a lot of authority about him. Yeah, that will draw you
it was good.
To the guard. So I downed my glass, which, having not eaten for a good 6-something hours, gave me just a little buzz for the first section, as Gary described. Which was good fun. Yeah, it really added to it for me. And then in we went. So how long was it?
I think it was about like 3 hours.
Yeah, something like that.
Just under.
Yeah.
With a break in the middle as well. But the first part was, quite autobiographical, which was really interesting, hearing about Gary and who he was and who he is and whatnot. But the first part was like why I write. You've got to know why you want to write. Why are you doing this? Who is it for? All of that. And he gave the one and only exercise of the whole seminar, which I quite enjoyed. The idea of only having this one and not actually giving you any time for it anyway, which was to write down the reason that you are here. Why are you here? Why do you want to write? And looking round, there were some phenomenal answers. Goodness me.
Because they had specified an email to bring like a notepad and a pen or a laptop.
Yeah.
And I went for a laptop, but I also just kept it in my bag knowing that it was like I forgot who I was when I obeyed that instruction. Because I've never taken notes on anything in my entire life. And it was as if suddenly I was going to be like, okay, well, maybe I am the kind of person who's going to take 10 pages in 3 hours. But no.
Listeners might have picked up on Isaac's lack of note-taking throughout his life.
I doubt that very much. I think I made up for it with all this memory that I've got. And instead of following my disregard for the instruction, people have brought like entire little libraries of books ready to write in. Someone asked for extra paper, like the end of an exam. It was all very sad.
That's madness, isn't it?
What, when people ask for extra paper?
Very, very odd. No, that people were taking so many notes that they were like, the woman next to me took at least 3 or 4 pages of notes, which I don't quite know what she was writing down, because whilst like the speech was very interesting and like gave some like cool ideas about writing and whatnot, I don't think there was anything in there that I'd need to write down to remember.
No, there were no like specific new, as if you'd go expecting there to be, like you said, some kind of secret.
Well, like obviously there's not going to be anything like that. But, there were interesting tips about, how to keep writing, facing the tyranny of the blank page and whatnot, and some like cool ideas about incorporating other voices.
A lot of cool ideas about the nut graph.
That was a horrid term.
Hell of a
that.
Yeah.
But all of it was stuff that you kind of go, oh, yeah, no, that is quite interesting. I'll try that. Rather than, okay, let me write that down And then when I'm next writing, I'll whip out the old Gary Young notes and I'll just give this one a good old college try.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very odd. The woman next to me took the note. It's your underlined voice. Like, what
Which
do you
for
mean?
a seminar called Finding Your Voice seems a redundant bit of information.
How's she going to use that note?
Maybe she's just going to
She was going home and like writing in Louis Armstrong's voice and then she's going to next time look at it and go, no, this is wrong.
Come on, Karen. It's
very, very odd.
It's going to feature in some kind of Rocky montage as she bangs out the next Harry Potter, completely in the voice of Tolkien, just breaking for a 3-page song every song about how an elf wants to run out. Lovely stuff.
God, the Lord of the Rings books are bad.
They're so boring, aren't they? I love the Lord of the Rings, but
they're really
very dull to read.
It's like all of the fun parts of reading, and even of fantasy, which isn't a genre I particularly enjoy, but like can get into. And he just went, well, we're not having any of that.
What we're going to have instead is 80 pages of discussion about linguistics. It's like
and here's a 100-page history of everything elves have ever done. We start with Elf 1, or Elf 0, as some may call him.
Yeah.
Although, of course, in the Elven language, we don't use 1 or 0, or the word elf.
You actually call it elf.
Here instead is
the singular. There are a bunch of notes, and I'll ask this. Did you see any that you thought, yeah, good note, maybe I'll take? Did you make any yourself?
Not a single one. No, well, I wrote down Gary Young, in case I forgot.
Again, was in the title of the class.
And then when he was like, because I was sat in the aisle, so he could see everything I was and wasn't doing. So when he was like, I want you to write down why you write, I was like, oh, well, I probably should write something. So I wrote why I write, and then I couldn't think of anything. So I wrote to hopefully fill up the website.
You caved to Gary's pressure, and I don't think he'll respect you for that. Because what I did was I put both my hands in the air, holding no pens, and I just stared at him the whole time everyone else was writing. And he sort of gave me a look that was like, that reserved, where you hate to give that much respect, but you kind of have to anyway. It was that was the moment we shared. And he's invited me.
We went to 2 different talks then.
Yeah, well, we might as well have done for all the writing.
Yeah, I didn't see many notes that I liked. To the why I write question, there was a guy across the aisle from me who wrote to show that I exist as a human being.
Yep.
Like, well, you've done that. I've seen you. So no need for you to write. You're off.
It's interesting strategy as well when there have never been more robots writing text. Like, to show that you exist through writing is a very roundabout, circuitous way of doing it, rather than just turning up at someone's door and being like, hey, just wanted to let you know, like, I exist as a human being. Whereas if you send them a book, it could be written by the Harry Potter and the Giant Portrait of Ash guys.
Yeah, I very much wanted to just go over to him and say, you're better off doing a capture.
Yeah, you're better off doing a little YouTube live.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Of course, that Sophia the robot is like ruining that for all of us.
For fuck's sake.
Once she can do that.
Won't they leave us anything, those robo boys with all their knowledge? Just not good.
Well, we're giving it to them.
I know, that's the greatest shame of all, isn't it? We're bringing about our own.
So, the woman in front of me had 3 reasons, you might recall.
Yep.
One was, it's the only way to deal with my anger. Which was a really interesting thing to see from one of the smallest,
she looked like
seemingly happiest women I've ever seen.
She looked like, she'd be like a friendly facilitator of an event or something. And she was...
Yeah, exactly.
She was like smiling. She'd met some people in the canteen, I could see, like having a lovely time. But apparently concealing every second of the way an incredible Hulk.
Burning white hot
just
fury.
waiting to just punch Gary straight in his face if he gave any wrong-headed advice.
What if her anger is caused by the fact that no one ever believes she could be angry? What if we're part of the problem?
That's true, isn't it? That's a thing, because that often happens in like children's films, doesn't it? There'll be some sort of like the littlest borrower or the weakest willed LF, as you put it, will suddenly flip towards Act 2, and that's when you realise you have to take them seriously as an individual with feelings. So maybe you're right.
Like Carrie.
Yeah, it is like Carrie.
We were in a seminar with Carrie.
She didn't make fuck all float.
She was fucking furious. Carrie. She'd never been angry.
I know, she couldn't deal with it at all. I feel like the whole town was on.
No. I feel like she did overreact. I mean, look, fair enough, love. Bullying's wrong. We're not saying that it's right.
Yeah, but also, her what's her name, boyfriend gets killed with a big bucket, doesn't he? So that's going to put you in a bad mood.
Yeah. And her mum was pretty horrid.
Oh, she was very mad.
Really horrid.
Yeah, I can't believe it.
Yeah, so this girl's second reason, once she got rid of all that anger...
Was that line just... Sorry to interrupt. Was that first one to get rid of my anger? Did you notice that it had been written in a much harder pen stroke than all the others? Was it like...
Oh, it was all typed, so very hard to see.
Oh.
No, it was all on a laptop, so it was all the one font, Calibri.
She hadn't put it in bold, maybe, to just kind of get some of that.
No, I was hoping. It wasn't all caps.
It wasn't in chiller.
She didn't, slam the keyboard. No. Imagine writing in chiller to show your own.
That's to show your spooky. It's one of the grave errors.
To show your... I hope someone's why I write was to show I'm speaking.
That's R.L. Stein, creator of the...
No one believes me when I speak, but they will. They will. When I get these words down, people are going to freak the fuck out.
They'll be sorry they wrote me off as non-spooky.
Yeah. Her second reason was to change political discourse.
Yeah. It's a bold, out there kind of concept, but go for it.
And her third reason was the somewhat troubling, when paired with the anger part, so that people will know.
Yeah. Does read like an extract from the manifesto of a full-on bomber, probably of the suicide.
Yeah, I was going to say it's very Unabomber. Yeah. He was angry and wanted people to know, and he wanted people to know all about his fucking drivel.
That whole manifesto.
Oh yeah.
Well, the title was Papyrus, but that was just for the kind of gravitas because it gestures towards like a lineage.
Yeah, exactly. Some sort of ancient power behind your words. Yeah. And then he signed off his name in one of those weird kind of like Bookman old script ones or whatever they are.
That was a good idea.
Where it's you remember how everyone used to do that for if you wrote letters on the computer at primary school to show that it was a signature. You just write it in a slightly fancier font.
Isn't it? They look like
that's what signatures are. Yeah.
What about this idea I've just had?
Yeah.
You could do an art installation about typefaces and fonts. Now, I know that bit sounds boring, but stick with me. What we do is
I'm with you
take
already.
Some of the objectively most horrible texts ever written. So it's going to be things like that man's letters to Bjork when he wanted to blow her up with a letter bomb, and also
what's his name? Someone Fish, the American serial killer?
Yeah, sure.
The one who captured and tortured and killed and ate children and then wrote letters to their mums saying that he'd done that.
So you take
him, they're pretty horrid, I've heard.
You could even it'd be good to have like Gary was talking about, or the below the line comments that he gets that are just pure racist filth.
Yeah.
Things like that. And
put them in wingdings, you say?
Well, no, because wingdings, as we all know, is one of the great errors of humanity. On a font that makes writing no longer writing. I don't understand it at all. Do you remember that conspiracy about how you could 9/11? Do you remember 9/11? You're probably a bit young. It was 2001.
I remember.
Yeah, so it was a great big news story, and you may have thought
something about planes.
Yeah, I don't want to break this to you now, but you probably thought that was terrorists that did it, didn't you? Until today.
That's the narrative that I've read.
Now, but riddle me this, okay? In Wingdings, possibly Webdings 2, if you were to go in and you were going to type 9/11, maybe, you were sending a letter to someone using the Webdings font just for presumably your own twisted and fundamentally incorrect sense of fun. And you came to the phrase, oh, awful about 9/11, isn't it? You'd write isn't it? That would all be normal. But 9/11 becomes 2 towers and a skull and crossbones. So if that doesn't prove to you that it was an inside job, like, I don't know what else.
Bill Gates did 9/11.
That's what I'm telling you. And I've been shouting.
Bloody hell.
It's mental.
Have we just broken this story?
I mean, the thing about it is people, it's out there, this information, but you know what sheeple are like these days? They're blind to the truth. They're blind to the fat earth.
Oh, they'll fucking
blind to the
believe
web.
anything the MSM tells
It's
them.
sickening. It's honestly gross. But here's my idea. We take all those horrid texts, frame them, but they're all written in like the most incongruous fonts. So like imagine the Unabomber manifesto, just a mixture of like Comic Sans and word art. And the idea would be not to make light of how dreadful and, you know, mentally ill most of these people are.
But to show how preposterous
Comic Sans is.
These thoughts and texts and people
Yeah, but
are.
also to show how, you know, visual context is everything. Like you can control people's responses to ideas just by how they look.
We could do the opposite as well. Like you could write the Cat in the Hat in Chiller.
No, stop. You're going to
be creepy as fuck.
Because you know Chiller's one of the scariest.
Cat is coming to eat you.
You know Chiller.
It's the spookiest font going.
It looks like it's bleeding. And you can't. Oh,
Dr. Seuss explicitly forbade
that was actually the only thing he wrote in his will. It was just a 1-page post-it note. Interestingly, in Chiller, I suppose to demonstrate to all present at the reading of the will, like the effects that it could have, because they would have been spooked to fuck. And he just said,
and against all expectation, it didn't even rhyme.
That's the weirdest part of all.
Just to really make the point.
What about that Dr. Seuss porn name? God, isn't it? Let's gloss over it and pretend it never happened. What were you going to
say? I was going to say that, talking about Dr. Seuss's note not rhyming, the note that we invented.
Oh, right. I've become confused.
Just so we're clear. Is that, it just reminded me of one of the real bullshits of tutoring, especially English, is about how you can make the exact same point about completely opposite techniques that I know that I've told people to say, you know, this point, like he uses rhyme here because it really emphasizes, the kind of, and stresses the words at the end of the line here and shows us kind of some of the thematic choices. But then also, I know that I've said here he deliberately doesn't rhyme because it makes that stand out and really stresses that word. So you could just say the same thing for anything. It just does not matter.
That's our degree for you.
God, it's a great big bullshit. We should have told Gary that yesterday.
Gary,
I think he'd have liked that.
Oh, we should talk about the questions as well. So as we've set up, like we're going to skip through, we're not going to just recount 3 hours of pure Gary Young gold, because the man's a genius and he's an exceptional writer. And even though, as we've said, I firmly believe no one in the whole history of humanity can impart any lesson that will make you a good writer. You just have to kind of do it and work it out for yourself. The stuff he was talking about was interesting, and it was interesting to me to see how it related to other advice, like from the Script Notes podcast and from Stephen King's book and things. And it's all basically saying the same thing, isn't it? So that was all good. But then one inauspicious feature of the itinerary was section 4, which, as we were sitting there, became an elongated section because he was like, oh yeah, I want to get to this because give you guys plenty of time. You've heard me talk for long enough. Let's get to the Q&A. Now, Q&A, as we discussed when we met Tommy Wiseau, is usually a great big car crash for exactly the opposite reasons that one was a car crash in its own way. It was kind of a reverse car crash, which is where a car's reversing into another one, in case that was unclear. Because Tommy handled it with aplomb by just shutting down every question, saying, no one cares about that, man. Sit down. They're here to watch the movie. And then cackling away. Q&As usually, and especially this kind of pretentious audience of people who, you know, by being there, they think they've got something to say, and maybe they all do, and maybe everyone does, but the kind of person who goes to a writing seminar included
they
the
didn't.
sound of their own voice, even if they haven't found it quite yet. So I was worried. I was worried that it would be the kind of question that is a minute and a half long, goes nowhere, but touches on all the different, I wrote once in the Wigan Herald an article that was, it was very well received, albeit not got me anywhere just yet.
Not widely.
The readership, print media these days, it's not, Gary, you'll appreciate this, it's not like it used to be.
It's a dying form.
Let me tell you, the people of Wigan, I mean, I've lived there all my life, born and raised. You can't tell from the accent, but don't worry about that. They're not, they don't read like they used to, Gary. And anyway, what's your favourite letter of the alphabet? Things like that just ramble on to meaninglessness and leave. I find them much more awkward than everyone else in the room seems to, because they're just like, I'm embarrassed for the person asking the question, and I'm embarrassed on behalf of the person who has to answer it. The whole thing is just really cringy.
Oh, definitely.
And they weren't quite as bad as I thought, but there was some gold within the question section.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, the questions yesterday fell into a few kind of broad categories. Question number one, of which I think there was the most abundance, was things that had already been answered if you'd listened to the talk.
Here's a little addendum. And things that were answered in the very title of the talk.
Yeah. I mean, one woman asked, how do you reconcile your voice with the voices of other writers who have influenced you? Like, how do you reconcile and just create the one voice?
Should be legally.
I know. And all I was sat there thinking was, that was the entirety of sections 1 and 2. Like, he spent a good hour and 10 minutes talking about this already. Like, why, like, this, it's the thing that, like, she probably wrote that question down when he first said about incorporating other voices, and then didn't listen for the rest of the talk because she was focusing on answering that question. Asking that question, sorry.
Be like, someone's going to stand up and clap and be like, "You're the voice of the people."
And then someone was like, how do you, like, do you think that you see yourself as a black writer, or do you not want to be pigeonholed like that? Do you think that you're just a writer who happens to be black? And you're like, again, that was the whole first section. He did a whole hour on this.
Like, that was
like, it
wasn't subtext.
He's not one to mince words, is he? So, like, those people, like, can absolutely all fuck off into the sea.
Maybe those are the people who should
the second
notes, but when I say notes, I mean verbatim everything that was. They can just review that on their own.
Yeah, so they can reread. Then there was people who were asking the wrong question, or were the wrong person to be asking that question. There was an extraordinarily white guy at the front who was asking about, was there a particular black moment in the 80s?
Oh yeah, and he seemed to kind of
and do we need one now?
Yeah, because what was it, in Manchester or something? Like, I didn't know the reference, not being from the 80s.
Stuart Hall and someone.
It was crazy, and it just felt like a black moment, which is not a phrase that, it's not an offensive phrase, but it did make me recoil briefly to hear it coming from a white guy.
Someone so very, very white. And you're like, why are you asking that? That's not.
And also, like, why do you think there was one black guy knows the answer if there is a black moment? He's not like an envoy.
He's plugged into
hang
the
on,
black
guys. Let me just check Black Twitter. No, there is a moment. Yeah, thanks for checking on that, Phil.
Hang on a minute. Yep, no, that is a good question. I'm just going to have
to
ask
the Black Elders.
I'm going to text Lenny Henry and let me
misjudged, but well-meaning. But he's the kind of person who probably says that he has black friends.
Yeah. Oh, he does, doesn't he? Definitely. He probably. He definitely did a Facebook status about going to this event afterwards, in which he mentioned at least 3 times that Gary Young is black. just so that and he definitely lied about the racial demographic of the room, which was inordinately white. Yeah. And he definitely made it sound like a hugely multicultural event.
It took place in Brixton Market, and that it was like, it wasn't really an invite thing. You just kind of rock up. It's, you know,
I heard about it from my friend who's he's Albanian but via Uganda, and he hears about all these things.
What a journey!
Yeah, it's quite a way, but it was worth it for this
hell of a layover.
And then there are people who just are what I'm going to call losers.
All right, Trump.
Just people who there's no nice way to describe them or their questions, really. I suppose well-meaning is as close as I can get.
Yeah, but that doesn't quite count.
People who
there's a hopelessness.
No,
that
it is a tragedy.
But power, and it's good. Like, we should encourage them to power through it. But I mean, we've got to talk about the guy
just not while I'm
in front of me, who asked a question that had no basis. Like, when we were trying to analyze why he asked it, we just came to why he was even there in the first place. Because this man, he'd been writing away, like typing on a laptop, and it's just clicked for me that I noticed this as weird. This is like my usual suspects dropping the mug moment. I noticed that he was logging into his computer in a really weird way at the beginning of the talk, and that I didn't recognize, like, the login screen. It wasn't Windows. It wasn't
was it? No.
So it was some kind of...
Was it Linux?
Yeah, it was some, like, custom Linux distribution.
Yeah, I thought
and that should have set me up for knowing what he was going to ask when he put his hand up. He put his hand up quite boldly.
Yep.
It wasn't like retiring.
It wasn't timid, no.
He put it straight and he asked a question that applied, and he must have known this, to no one else, not only in the room, but in almost any room, in any part of the world you could care to mention. His question was an awkward, rambling, kind of semi-meek offering about how you would write an article. I guess the high level view of his question was about how do you meld different concepts together where one is interesting and the rest are necessary but dumb.
Well, yeah, no, I think that the root of the question was like, how do you get people to understand the, as he said it, the nuts and bolts of something when they are really only interested in the overview. Which, like, is a decent enough question, but that's not what he asked. That's what I have asked.
Because what he
he said, nuts and bolts question, really. Let's say if you're like, okay, this is what I don't like, is that I know that he spent the whole thing working on this false pretense of like coming up with something on the spot. I was just thinking when really
about the phrase like opening with nuts and bolts question, really, comma, is so rehearsed. You like when you hear that people have been like practicing their question in their head, it makes me cry a bit.
Yeah, but then what's even more like definitely artificial was his let's say you're
I don't know.
I'm an IT consultant, so let's say someone's got the kernel, the email, the pop filters, and just and like Gary was looking at him like with such blank despair because there was still no clue. They're talking for about 30 seconds. There was no clue where the question was going. There was just jargon, and Gary was like, "Sorry, what?" Like trying to ask him to repeat it, and this guy was like, "Nerd speak, like don't worry."
He actually said geek,
but then went on to say it again. Oh yeah, geek talk. Sorry,
like a podcast that he runs. I think that he's trying to subtly hint that we should download.
Yeah,
but yeah,
it's this like horrid mix of like he's being self-defeating, like, or self-deprecating, but in a way that like I actually think that he looks down on us for not knowing what that is. It's like, it's geek talk, so
but, don't worry. But
basically,
and you got to patch and there's been an exploit, like there's an SQL breach. We call it SQL in the biz, Gary. Don't worry about that. Now,
Yeah.
And then basically, you've got to write a whole piece about it. So his question was essentially like about one thing. It was about one thing he's got to write, and it couldn't be less universal if he tried. It couldn't be less universal. Like,
No.
Gary, yeah, nuts and bolts question. Imagine you're an IT professional. What number am I thinking of? And then just sat there, shouts different digit combinations, hoping the world will suck this man into its hollow, fetid core.
But it did instigate possibly my favourite moment of the whole talk, which was he did all this jargon about, you got this kernel and it's not patched through properly, and all this. He's like, and you want to explain that, but all people want to hear is the bank details have been lost. So how do you do that? And Gary looked at me and was like, well, you had me at bank
which
details,
is a great
which I liked because it proved the guy's point. It proved the guy's point. But then went on to say, because I have a bank, I have details, which is just the most phenomenal, breaking down. It felt like he was taking the piss out of unit ideas that we've spoken about before. Well, how do we break bank details down into smaller things people can understand? Bank and details.
There we go. That's done. That's a postgraduate degree you've got there.
Yeah.
There were some other...
as we said earlier, Gary managed to turn that whole thing into a big inspirational moment of the talk, which I'd have just asked for the man to be removed.
I would not even asked. I would have known that my security guard was on point enough. If I just stopped for a moment, the man would be handcuffed to the radiator.
It'd be great. It'd be great if you don't even have to stop for a moment. It's just people ask their question, and if you answer it, they're fine. Mm-hmm. But if you just turn to ask for another question, they know that someone's going to drag them out.
Their chair just collapsed.
There were, as you were going on to say, there were some other phenomenal moments from the crowd. There was the man who sneezed and then blessed himself.
That was weird. And he was an old, not old as in ancient, but my point is he was an adult. No. He was a fully fledged, card-holding adult. And he was sat on the aisle and he just went, bless me. I was like, you can't do that. No one does that.
No, that's
weird.
Not a thing.
How have you got this far in life without anyone telling you it's unacceptable in a room
just punching you in the face?
Very strange. That was odd. There was a Scottish woman who had a great sense of scale. And she was asking, I can't remember what her question was about. Was it about changing political discourse or something?
No. So it was about, someone had asked about publishing and as a black writer, how do you avoid this sort of any kind of racist gatekeepers and whatnot? And one of Gary's points was that all you need to publish these days is Wi-Fi. If you've got Wi-Fi, you can publish. Yeah. That's the case. And then this Scottish woman at the front referencing, I think, again, because it's where her question had come from, the very beginning of the talk, where Gary had brought up some of Orwell's writing about the four main reasons people write. And hers she was going for options 1 and 3, which was ego and politics. And she was like, so if I decided to write, from ego and because I want to change the political discourse. Well, okay, bold again. She was like, you said that, you only need Wi-Fi to publish, but it's massive.
Wi-Fi is so huge.
It's the biggest thing in the world.
It was quite interesting because, she's not wrong in a sense. Just that I've never heard anyone. I guess she's the greatest writer of all because she's made me think completely differently about something as banal as the size of Wi-Fi.
What? How big is Wi-Fi?
But then there was another person who was interested in
this one was my favourite.
Yeah, it was just such a lovely delivery in a question that it had the air of someone you're going to have to cheer up at the end of the question. Be like, come on, you can do it. It's all right. We're all in this together.
Yeah, and someone who had been thinking about rehearsing this question, then tried to do a little bit off the cuff, and absolutely got totally lost.
Found himself scrambling back up the hill to rehearse it.
They were clutching at literally any voice in the room in order to have some words, because it started off. Another person who liked the word reconcile. Talk about, reconciling all these voices that you've heard, and how you're trying to incorporate those into one singular voice that is your own. And I was just I was wondering how you bring together all of your all of your experiences and all of the people that you've met and the voices you've heard, in the big world.
The big world. If that were the first book, the big world.
The big world
is everywhere.
The big world. It's the big world trilogy. The big world, the bigger world, the biggest world.
Biggest world 2. Bigger than ever.
Biggest world 3. This time it's big.
Too big to fail. That's just such a sweet, naive turn of phrase. Oh dear.
It was just in the big. I think she probably was going to say the big wide world, which just is a phrase, but then bottled on whole, big on wide, yeah, and that was it. The big world.
God, I mean, I tell you what, the big world.
It is incredible people do that.
I do like the as much as I also find it a cause of great despair. There is invariably gold in Q&As. There's something about that social dynamic of you have to be confident, but it never shows. The confidence that they have is a confidence of potential. It's I'll ask a question, and then as soon as the spotlight is on the person, almost universally they just crumble into a quivering, language lacking ball of just nervous energy that spews out the first thing that they're short
which is probably geek talk.
Well, it's nuts and bolts kind of geek talk thing, but you've got a popcorn kernel. It was all very good indeed, and we'd recommend Gary to anyone who cares to read. If you've not read No Place Like Home, which is his book of tracing this journey of the Freedom Riders through the American South, whilst also coming to terms with the differences between Black British and Black American identity, where he found out one of the observations that stuck with me. I read it years ago. One of the things that stuck with me was how, let's not beat around the bush, racist people in the South of America would initially treat him with a kind of hostility and pigeonhole him as one thing. But then when he opened his mouth and he's very well spoken, obviously, had this very well-spoken British accent. They just didn't know what to do with him. They're just two different ideas that collided into something that meant that he gets these incredible, truthful, horrid quotes out of people who might otherwise have their guard up because they're just trying to work out what Gary Young is as a concept.
Yeah, because it is great. All of the best kind of documentarians or journalists seem to have that kind of weapon in their arsenal that isn't even necessarily something that they've developed. Sometimes with Gary, that's just who he is. Who he is his best weapon. If you fancy a big cry, then Another Day in the Death of America is a phenomenal piece of writing.
Just a phenomenal concept.
I was going to ask one of the questions that I was going to ask him that got answered during the talk and during an answer to a different question was
when that person asked about the kernel in the big world.
Yeah, and how it relates to the massive Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
No, it was about his kind of honesty in that book, because there is so much in there about him, type people he failed to interview, people who hated him, people who wouldn't speak to him, or people who did and then demanded not to be in the book and whatnot. And it's it's very refreshing to read that, because otherwise, normally when you read something like this, you'd think that it had been successes all the way, but it just shows what a difficult kind of book to write it was. It was really good. We were going to do some email, but I have arrived at my destination and it's time for me to start my lesson. So it might save Shane Mail.
Do you call that #time to shoot?
I never do, because I've never had a desire to be arrested under the Sex Offenders Act. So,
well,
so I steer clear of that catchphrase, which I
please can you just for the show, just for the benefit of the show, when you go into the room today, when your subject walks in, you clap your hands, and go, right, time to shoot, and then sit down and get normal. Go on, do it and record it.
Like I'm because they're home alone. That's an actual assault. Yeah,
yeah, that is putting fear into them. Okay, well, let's wrap up.
Yeah, thanks very much. Sorry for there being no Sunday episode, and sorry that this episode is almost inevitably going to be something of a technological travesty. But back to normal for Sunday's episode.
Sure,
we promise.
Yes, thanks for bearing with us. We're on Twitter at That's a Shamecast, at Cynical Declan, Isaac BD, emails to tass@shame.city, check out shame.city as well, patreon.com/shamecity is our Patreon. Anything else? No, I think that's all. Reviews on iTunes.
Womibomb,
of course, as well. Until next time, I've been Isaac, you've been...
I've been Declan.
Live from the road, and we'll see you very, very, very soon.
Bye, guys.
Look for the bare necessities, the simple bare necessities. Forget about your worries and your strife. I mean the bare necessities, oh Mother Nature's recipes that bring the bare necessities of life. Wherever I wander, wherever I roam, I couldn't be fonder of my big home. The bees are buzzing in the tree to make some honey just for me. The bare necessities of life will come to you. For the bare necessities, the simple bare necessities. Forget about your worries and your strife. I mean the bare necessities, oh Mother Nature's recipes that bring the bare necessities of life. Wherever I wander, wherever I roam, I couldn't be fonder, my new home. The bees are buzzing in the tree to make some honey just for me. The bare necessities of life will come to you. Come to you.